Breaking: RCMP deploy cadaver dogs, searching the woods for Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Breaking news out of Nova Scotia. The RCMP have now confirmed that cadaver dogs will be deployed in the search for 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack. These are not ordinary search dogs. They are trained to detect only one thing: the scent of human remains. And that announcement raises a chilling question. Has the investigation shifted from a search for life to a search for death? For more than 4 months, the RCMP have insisted they have no reason to believe the children are deceased. Yet their actions now tell a different story. Flying in rare cadaver dog teams from British Columbia is no small step. It is expensive, deliberate, and deeply symbolic. Grandmother Belinda Gray says she wanted to jump up and down at the news, relief that something she's demanded for months is finally happening. But her joy is shadowed by frustration. Why only now? Why did it take so long? And why, as cadaver dogs are brought in, does the children's mother and stepfather remain silent? This is no longer just another search update. It is a turning point. A moment when the public must ask whether RCMP are preparing to uncover the darkest truth in Nova Scotia's woods. Cadaver dogs are not ordinary search animals. They are not trained to follow the scent of a living person or to chase the faint trail of a lost child wandering through the woods. They have one purpose, and one purpose only: to detect the unmistakable odor of human decomposition. Their noses are tuned to death itself. Staff Sergeant Stephen Pike, Program Manager of the RCMP's Police Dog Services Training Center, described these animals as highly specialized and highly trained. He explained that cadaver dogs can locate remains even in places that defy human effort, beneath soil, hidden underwater, even buried deep within landfills or septic fields. In fact, Pike recalled one case where a cadaver dog detected material on the ocean floor 2 years after it had been lost. These are not just dogs. They are instruments of truth, capable of finding what eyes cannot see and what silence tries to hide. And now, 4.5 months after Lilly and Jack Sullivan vanished from their home in Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia, cadaver dogs are being deployed. The RCMP insists this does not mean investigators believe the children are dead. Corporal Guillaume Tremblay told reporters, "What's important to remember is that at this time, we don't have any definitive information to support that the children are deceased. But we have to keep our minds open and look at all investigative avenues." Those words are cautious. They are carefully designed to reassure a public already worn down by months of unanswered questions. Yet the action, flying in cadaver dog teams from British Columbia, tells a very different story. Out of the 6 to 8 human remains detection dogs working in Canada, none are based in Nova Scotia. The RCMP had to summon 2 rare teams across the country: Sergeant Dave Whalen with his dog Kit and Inspector Luke Reddy with his dog Narc. This is no symbolic gesture. It is costly, deliberate, and it changes the tone of the investigation. Because cadaver dogs are never brought in lightly. They are not deployed for routine searches. They are not used to comfort families or to satisfy the press. They are used when investigators fear that death has occurred, when the possibility of recovery begins to outweigh the possibility of rescue. So the contradiction now hangs heavy. On one hand, the RCMP say there is no definitive evidence of death. On the other, their actions reveal they are preparing for exactly that. The public is left to reconcile these two truths: the official language of hope and the unspoken reality of dread. And in that gap, suspicion grows. Why now? That is the question echoing across Nova Scotia tonight. If cadaver dogs are such a critical resource, why were they not brought in sooner? Why did it take more than 4 months? 800 public tips, 8,000 videos reviewed, and an entire community scouring 8.5 square kilometers of wilderness before the RCMP finally turned to this most decisive tool? For many, The delay feels like more than oversight. It feels like hesitation. It feels like investigators were reluctant to confront what cadaver dogs represent, the possibility that Lilly and Jack are no longer alive. By holding off, the RCMP clung to the narrative that the children might still be found safe. But as the weeks turned into months, and as each search ended with nothing but silence, that narrative collapsed under its own weight. Grandmother Belinda Gray put words to what so many have been thinking. She said she wanted to jump up and down at the news. Finally, something was being done. Yet her relief was sharpened by anger. They're finally doing something that, to me, should have been done a couple of months ago at least. That, at least, cuts deep. It reflects the feeling that valuable time has been lost, time that could have yielded answers, perhaps even a chance at rescue, before hope decayed into dread. And the public shares that frustration. From the very beginning, communities in Pictou County watched helicopters sweep low over the trees, watched volunteers march shoulder to shoulder in search grids, watched police dogs strain at their leashes. But through it all, cadaver dogs remained absent. Each day they were missing from the effort, questions grew louder. Was the RCMP avoiding them because they feared the symbolism? Or was it because they truly did not believe death was a possibility until now? There is also the matter of resources. Human remains detection dogs are rare in Canada, only 6 to 8 in the entire country. None are stationed in Nova Scotia. The closest team, based in Prince Edward Island, was sidelined due to medical leave. To call in dogs from British Columbia requires coordination, money, and justification. The RCMP knew that once they crossed that line, the case would no longer be viewed as a hopeful search but as a grim recovery mission. That decision, it seems, has finally been made. But in waiting so long, the RCMP may have undermined themselves. The family sees the delay as proof of inaction. The public interprets it as reluctance. And critics argue it reflects a broader pattern of the RCMP being reactive rather than proactive, letting opportunities slip through their fingers. So here we are, more than 4 months later, with cadaver dogs on their way. Their arrival is not just an investigative move. It is an admission that the RCMP can no longer pretend time is on their side. Whatever optimism once surrounded this case has now been overtaken by suspicion. Suspicion that the truth has been buried along with 2 children somewhere in the forests of Nova Scotia. When the RCMP confirmed cadaver dogs would finally be deployed, no one spoke louder than Belinda Gray, the children's paternal grandmother. Her words carried both joy and fury. Joy, because after months of pleading, her calls were finally answered. Fury, because it had taken this long. They're finally doing something that to me should have been done a couple of months ago at least, she said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who has waited far too long for action. Belinda has been one of the few family members consistently speaking to the media. From the beginning, she has pushed for more transparency, more urgency, more honesty from the RCMP. Her perspective is clear. Every delay is another wound, every unanswered question another betrayal. For her, silence is the worst enemy of all. But silence is exactly what has surrounded much of the immediate family. The children's mother, Malehya Brooks Murray, and stepfather, Daniel Martel, have been largely absent from the public conversation. Their quiet has not gone unnoticed. In a case where every development is dissected, their lack of visible emotion or public appeals has only fueled speculation. Why do they remain silent as the RCMP shifts into what looks more like a recovery mission than a rescue effort? Why do they not stand beside Belinda in demanding answers? The RCMP, in court documents released in August, suggested they did not believe the case was criminal in nature as of mid-July. That statement indirectly shielded Malehya and Daniel from public suspicion. Yet, for many observers, the silence of the parents is still difficult to understand. In most cases of missing children, parents are the loudest voices, giving interviews, making pleas, begging for leads. Here, their absence is striking. This silence has created a vacuum, and into that vacuum pours suspicion. Some in the community whisper that silence means knowledge. Others interpret it as fear or shame or perhaps even resignation. The truth is that no one knows. But in the absence of visible grief or public advocacy, the narrative has shifted toward doubt. Meanwhile, Belinda Gray stands as the emotional core of the family's response. She admits the roller coaster of emotions is nearly unbearable. Brief bursts of hope followed by crushing waves of despair. Her plea for cadaver dogs reflects both her desperation and her determination. Unlike others, she refuses to remain quiet. And so, the contrast is clear. On one side, a grandmother demanding action, her voice breaking through the silence. On the other, a mother and stepfather whose quiet has become almost as loud as any statement. In a case already defined by contradictions, between RCMP words and actions, between hope and dread, the silence of the family has become one more unsettling piece of the puzzle. For the public, it raises yet another haunting question. When cadaver dogs step into the woods of Nova Scotia, will they be searching for answers the family already suspects? When cadaver dogs are introduced into an investigation, the theories about what really happened shift dramatically. The focus is no longer on search and rescue, but on what might explain why specialized dogs trained to find death are now needed. In the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, three main scenarios dominate the discussion. The first is the accident theory, that the children wandered too far into the dense forests around Lansdowne Station and perished naturally. Nova Scotia's wilderness is unforgiving. Swamps, rivers, dense undergrowth, all can conceal the remains of two small children for months. Even with 160 searchers, helicopters, drones, and standard police dogs, the terrain may have simply swallowed them. If this is the case, cadaver dogs could be the last hope of locating what the human eye has missed. Their ability to detect decomposition even beneath foliage or under shallow ground makes them uniquely suited to such a task. The second is the concealment theory, that someone deliberately hid Lilly and Jack's bodies. This is the most chilling possibility, and the one that cadaver dogs are often most critical for. These dogs are capable of detecting human remains hidden in places as grim as septic tanks, landfills, and even underwater. Staff Sergeant Stephen Pike himself noted that cadaver dogs can succeed where every other method fails. If foul play was involved, if someone buried or otherwise concealed the children, cadaver dogs may be the only way to uncover the truth. The third is the procedural theory, that the RCMP do not necessarily believe the children are dead, but that they cannot afford to leave any stone unturned. After 4 months, 800 tips, and 8,000 videos reviewed with no results, the pressure on investigators is immense. By deploying cadaver dogs, the RCMP can demonstrate to the public that every investigative avenue has been pursued, no matter how grim. It may be as much about optics as it is about expectation. Each of these theories carries different implications. If the accident theory proves true, then the tragedy lies in time lost, time that could have changed nothing, but still torments the family. If the concealment theory is correct, then the case takes on a criminal dimension that the RCMP had publicly dismissed just weeks ago. And if the procedural theory is closest to reality, then the deployment of cadaver dogs may be less about belief and more about appearance, though that is little comfort to a public watching hope fade with each passing day. The problem is that all three theories converge on one grim point. Cadaver dogs are not used unless death is on the table. Whether to find what nature has hidden, to uncover what someone has buried, or to check a box on the investigative list, their presence signals that the RCMP can no longer keep the search framed around life alone. For many, this is the silent admission they feared. That behind the cautious words, investigators may already suspect the worst. When the RCMP announced that cadaver dogs would be deployed, they offered no details about where or when the searches would take place. Corporal Guillaume Tremblay explained that searches are planned, but refused to reveal further information, citing safety concerns. That silence, deliberate and controlled, has only deepened the mystery. The most obvious location for the dogs is the dense forest around Gairloch Road, where the children were last seen. It was here, in the early days of May, that investigators seized a pink blanket and discovered small boot prints in the mud. Those fragments of evidence have haunted the case ever since. Could cadaver dogs now be returning to the same site, probing for what human searchers could not find? Another possibility is the waterways. Nova Scotia's wilderness is cut with streams, ponds, and wetlands, areas where ordinary search methods falter. Cadaver dogs, however, have proven effective even in aquatic environments. If the RCMP suspects the children may have drowned or that their remains were placed in water, dogs could be deployed along these hidden banks. Then there are darker possibilities. Staff Sergeant Stephen Pike reminded reporters that cadaver dogs can locate scents even in landfills or septic fields. That comment was not casual. It hinted at the kind of grim locations investigators may be considering, places where human remains could have been deliberately hidden. To the public, this suggestion is almost unbearable. To investigators, it is part of the grim reality they must face. So why the secrecy? Why not reveal the precise areas being searched? The RCMP claims it is about safety, but in practice, secrecy often serves another purpose: protecting the integrity of the investigation. If there is even a chance that foul play was involved, disclosing search sites could alert someone still under quiet scrutiny. Even if the case is not deemed criminal, investigators may hold leads that point to sensitive areas, leads they cannot risk compromising by broadcasting their plans. But secrecy cuts both ways. For families like the Greys who wait in torment for answers, the silence feels like another betrayal. For the public, it sparks suspicion. If the RCMP has specific targets in mind, why will they not admit it? Are they following up on new evidence or on private tips never revealed to the community? Are they preparing to confirm what some fear has been true all along? What is certain is that cadaver dogs are not deployed randomly. Their use is calculated, their time precious. Each deployment signals that investigators believe there is something specific to be found. And if the RCMP refuses to share where those dogs are going, it is because they already know exactly where to look. The question that remains is whether they are searching the woods for the first faint trace of an accident, or following the invisible scent trail of something far more deliberate. The moment the RCMP confirmed cadaver dogs would be flown in, the mood surrounding the case shifted. For months, hope, fragile though it was, clung to the edges of every press conference. Families whispered it, volunteers believed it, communities repeated it. Maybe the children were still alive, but cadaver dogs change everything. They do not search for the living, they search for the dead. And their arrival forces the public to confront a possibility that had always lingered in the shadows, but was rarely spoken aloud. To many, the RCMP's announcement feels like a silent admission. Officials can insist there is no definitive evidence that Lilly and Jack are deceased. They can emphasize that this is just another investigative avenue, but those words do little to blunt the symbolism. The mere presence of cadaver dogs is enough to convince people that investigators are bracing for tragedy. Actions, after all, speak louder than words. This has created a psychological turning point. Conversations in Pictou County and beyond no longer end with "maybe they'll come home." Instead, they falter into uneasy silence as neighbors and friends hesitate to say what they truly fear. The shift from hope to dread is subtle but unmistakable. Cadaver dogs do not bring optimism. They bring closure, and closure, in this case, would mean heartbreak. The RCMP may understand this better than anyone. By framing the dogs as part of a thorough investigation, they soften the blow. They avoid saying the unthinkable out loud, but at the same time, they prepare the public for the possibility that answers, if they come, will not be the ones anyone hoped for. This is not just investigative strategy, it is expectation management. For the family, the emotional impact is crushing. Grandmother Belinda Gray welcomes the dogs as long overdue, yet even she knows what their presence implies. She has lived the roller coaster of hope and despair for months. Now, with cadaver dogs in the picture, the ride seems to be nearing its inevitable drop. For the children's mother and stepfather, their silence only deepens suspicion. Are they clinging to hope privately, or do they already fear the same outcome the RCMP is preparing for? And for the wider public, the trust in the investigation erodes further. Every contradiction, every delay, every guarded phrase feels like proof that the RCMP knows more than it is saying. By bringing in cadaver dogs without admitting what they truly expect to find, the police risk feeding a narrative that they are hiding the truth. What cannot be hidden, however, is the symbolism. The dogs will go into the woods, the fields, perhaps even the water, following only the faintest scent of death. Their noses will tell a story words cannot, and whatever they find, or fail to find, will redefine this case once again. At this stage, hope feels like a whisper. The louder voice belongs to dread, and dread is exactly what cadaver dogs carry with them when they step off the plane in Nova Scotia. The RCMP may say they have no evidence that Lilly and Jack are deceased, but their actions tell another story. Cadaver dogs are not tools of hope. They are instruments of truth, truth that often confirms the very outcome no one wants to face. Their arrival in Nova Scotia signals a turning point, not only in the investigation, but in the way the public must now view this haunting case. For the grandmother, the deployment is bittersweet. For the wider family, silence still surrounds their response. And for the community, the symbolism is impossible to ignore. Cadaver dogs are stepping into the woods not to search for life, but to test whether death has already left its trace. So we are left with the chilling questions. Did investigators wait too long? Do they already suspect what they will not yet admit? And are these dogs being deployed not as a last resort of hope, but as the first step toward preparing us for the worst? What do you think? Are cadaver dogs the sign of a breakthrough, or the quiet confirmation of a tragedy that has been hidden all along? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to follow every development in this unfolding mystery, subscribe to True Child Cases. Here, we uncover the details, expose the contradictions, and follow the stories that others leave in silence, because every case matters and every missing child deserves the truth.